look beautiful. And so many.
Yeah.
Are you nervous?
Well,
60
it's eager trepidation.
Anxiety, interviewee anxiety.
No,
I'm
going
kinda
to have a
joking,
positive
everybody.
attitude. I feel wonderful. Okay, strength.
This is great. We're going to have a good time.
Okay,
All right?
I'm in your hands.
Well, I look upon these kinds of interviews not as 60 Minutes interviews. I look upon them as friendship and kind of fun. I hope
I
do
think
that.
I'm really impressed that I get to sit at the table with the big girls and the pros. And
You know
somebody call my brother and tell him I'm here.
Well, tell him hi, because I used to interview him when he was in the Senate, and I did Face the Nation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we had many, many conversations, let's say. Well, I read your book, so I know everything about you and your family. 'Cause
Oh,
it's
Jesus.
your memoir. Well, it's a memoir about you, but it's also about your brother and your entire family. And so in a way, it's a history book. And I think it will be viewed as a history book.
That's what Doris said, so I hope so.
I don't know how many people know that you were the first woman to run a modern U.S. Senate campaign and the first woman to ever run a presidential campaign. What's amazing is in both instances, you had absolutely no experience whatsoever. It's kind of astonishing that your brother put so much faith in someone. I can't imagine he knew that you were even going to be able to do it.
Well, I'll tell you, I have 3 brothers, one older, which is Joe, and 2 younger brothers. And from the time that I can remember, this is not an exaggeration, from the time I was a little girl, my big brother, Joey, put his hand out and he said, "Come on, Val, let's go. We've got places to go and people to see and things to do." And he took me with him every place. And when his friends said, "Why did you bring a girl?" He said, "She's not a girl, she's my sister." And he told me that whatever he could do, I could do better, which was impossible.
He said that? You could do better?
He said, these are the examples. He'd have a baseball and he would take it and he'd say, he'd throw it as far as he could. Let's pretend that he hits that exit sign. And then he'd go and get the ball and he'd bring it back to me. And he'd say, "Now you throw it through the window." And I did not go into this voluptuous woman overnight. I was tiny. But
You're still tiny.
I was the runt of the litter in the class, the smallest kid in the class. But my brother said that I could throw it through the window. And I knew that I owed it to him and to myself to try and be that little girl or that young woman that he thought I was capable of being. And I threw it through the damn window because he told me I could. Not to break the window, that's a poor example, but you hopefully get the point. So I have a PhD in Joe,
Yeah.
not in campaign management. And
You do have a PhD in Joe.
Yeah.
Tell that great story that's in the book. I love it. I think you're 6 years old and you go to a birthday party with a bunch of little girls and no one will talk to you.
Yeah.
You're ostracized. And so after a while you call
girls
home.
are so sweet.
Anyway, you call home and say, "Mom, I come get me," and tell what happens.
Okay. That was my best friend, Mary McGee. She lived across the street when we were in Scranton. We were in my grandparents' house right before we moved to Delaware. So I was going to turn 6 in November, and she was already 6. So she went to the public school. I went to Marywood, which was the girls' Catholic school up the street. So we were best friends in the neighborhood, but then when we never saw each other because of school. She had a birthday party. She had all her friends over, who I didn't know any of them. And like little girls and big girls, you know. When you're not in the in crowd, you're not in the in crowd. And I wanted to go home. And I called my mother, Mrs. McGee, and I said, I want to go home. Mrs. McGee said, no, stay and play. And I started to cry, and I said, I want to go home. She calls my mother, and my mother runs up the street to Maloney Field, which was, we didn't have organized baseball yet, Little League. I mean, we just all played at the local playground. Gets my brother, brings him home, spit shines him, you know, combs his hair, puts on a little suit, and he comes over and knocks on the door, and it's Mrs. McGee, and he said, I'm Joey Biden. And she said, I know who you are, come on in. And he stayed with me the whole party. And he held my
All
hand.
girls, everybody.
All girls. And he played Pin the Tail of the Donkey, and he played musical chairs. And when it was over, we left, and he said, thank you, Mrs. McGee. And we walked outside, and he said, thanks. I said, Joey, thank you for coming. He said, Val, thanks for inviting me. He was kind. You know, he was kind, and he made it okay. And he's still is kind, and he doesn't make everything okay. I mean, he screws some things up, but you know, what the hell.
Well, let me tell everyone, it's a pretty good book, but there's not one mark on Joe Biden in this book. Are you surprised? He's perfect.
No, actually, he's you know, good is good enough. And what I tried to make in the stories that I tell, it's not, he didn't come down and it's the laying of the hands and he's going to make everything all right. He's a regular guy. He can be a jerk. You know, he could hurt my feelings. But you know what? There's family and there's family and then there's family. And when we walked out of the door of our home, my mom always said, remember your Bidens. Not like your Rockefellers or Kennedys or whoever name big, but you were 4 little kids and you had each other's back. When we walked out of the house, we had each other's back. When we walked in, we had regular arguments, and we had family meetings, which I talk about in the book.
But Joe comes off pretty well in the book.
Yeah, well, but you know, he was a wonderful and is a really good brother. And when you're a good brother, you're going to be a good father, a good husband, and a good father, and I would say an extraordinary president. So I'm just adding that last part.
I have a really great brother, and he would never in a million years have put in my hands what your brother put in your hands. So first of all, he comes off as a very early feminist, because the first Senate campaign you ran was 72, and affirmative action had just been, I don't know if it was actually passed, but promulgated, so that people like me could get a job.
Yeah, we
Good
started
job.
out together in 72
right,
in our careers.
Exactly. Big overview, we'll go back and talk about the campaigns, but time and again, when you were running these larger campaigns, the professionals who would come under you were the campaign manager, would roll their eyes, kind of pat your head, pretty little girl, what does she know? And finally, whatever the issue was, they'd go to Joe, and time and again, he would say, whatever Valerie says.
Yeah. Should I tell that story?
I want you to pick out one really outrageous one and tell a story.
Okay.
Because it's over and over this happened.
1995, we're in the 96 campaign for 5th re-election. And we had one of the big guns by this time, the consulting firm, PR firm, media consultants who came in, and we were doing radio and TV, which we never did in the first campaign because we didn't have any money. So we get radio and TV. And it was the year in 96, you remember, with the ads where they put a picture of your opponent up and they would throw mud on it and the mud would fall down. It was one of those negative campaigns were really in. So we are 10 days out, and we had not allocated any money for TV because Philadelphia TV is the 5th most expensive market in the country, in the nation, And Delaware didn't have its own TV, so that we'd have to go on Philadelphia TV. And so we didn't think we were going to need it, but $3 million came in the last 10 days for interest groups against us. And that was, we had to go on TV to do something about it. So our media consultant said, we have to do such and such, whatever the ad was. Because Joe said, no written word, no spoken word, no ad, no piece of paper goes out unless Val signs off. That way he could go out and campaign. And my only agenda was Joe. And so, and it was he trusted me. So it's 11 o'clock, we start going over the response ad. And it keeps coming back the same way that the media firm, the guy was doing it, which sounded like every other ad, just changed the name, you know, it could have run in any place. I said, no, no, no. 1 o'clock in the morning, this started at 11 o'clock, and 1 o'clock the next morning. And we're supposed to go on at 6 o'clock, have this, it was cassette tapes that we did in the old days. So the guy finally says to me, and he was a nice man, and he said, Valerie, if you do not approve this, you are going to lose the election. And this response. And I said, I'm not approving it. That's not how my brother speaks. That's not how we run. That's not what this campaign's about. I'm not going to approve it. And he said, well, I'm going to have my boss call your boss. And I said, you mean you're going to tell Daddy on me? And I said, let me just help you. Let me just give you Daddy's telephone number so you don't have to bother to look it up. So 2 o'clock in the morning, my brother gets a call at home from the principal in the firm. And first thing he says, Jesus, what's the matter? Is Mom okay? No, everything's okay. What's wrong? He said, it's your sister. He said, what happened to Val? He said, nothing, except she won't let us run this ad, which is critical, and we like to run it by you. And he said, wait, Val said no? And he said, yes. And he said, well, then it's no. Good night. And he hung up the phone. And that's
But over and over.
Yeah.
So the first Senate campaign, he was very young. In fact, he was too young to be in the Senate when he ran. He was told, he ran against a third-term Republican, pretty entrenched in Delaware.
Nixon came and knighted him again, the third, yeah.
Yeah, and Nixon, this was Nixon's landslide election, 72, with George McGovern at the head of the ticket. There was no way Joe Biden was going to win this election. Even I think you at that point thought, this is practice, this is a practice run. And he was told that if he had any chance, he had to get a serious Washington political guru consultant to run it. And he said, nope, my sister. And your brother Jimmy was the fundraiser. And he didn't know any more than you did. He was younger than you were.
Yeah.
And you were younger than Joe.
Much younger.
And you won. It was a miracle. How did you win that campaign?
Well,
It's
my mother
stunning.
was the coffee chair. Everybody thought my dad, who was 63 at the time, looked like the senator. And Delaware's small, so it's 2 hours stem to stern, and it takes a half an hour to cross the state. So there was a Biden at every single event. And what we did is we snuck up. They used the Rose Garden strategy, which you all know. You know, why even acknowledge a Nat, who is your opponent, when you had a great senator, and he was. Caleb Boggs was a wonderful, decent human being. There was not one. Give me my Biden word of honor. There was not one negative remark in the entire campaign. And
Well, they ignored you, and you didn't attack.
And we didn't attack him because he didn't. It was about the reason we ran against him. We had three things. He was a wonderful man, but we were against the war in Vietnam. We were for civil rights, and we were one of the very first campaigns ever to talk about planet Earth and the environment. And we won. It was also the first year that 18-year-olds could vote. I was a teacher at Wilmington Friends, which was a bastion of Republican parents. The teachers were more Democratic. And it was these, I contend, I mean, labor helped us, good government helped us, but it was the parents of my students who I told if they didn't help in the campaign, I would flunk them. You know,
This is serious.
They weren't sure if I was serious, nor was I. But when these parents saw their kids who didn't get out of bed till 12 o'clock every Saturday or Sunday morning, when they saw them get up at 5:30 in the morning to hand deliver 160,000 pieces of literature throughout the state. It was our lit drop. It was called the Biden Post Office. These parents would not have voted for a Democrat if he were Christ Almighty. But their children voted and helped us. And they said, you know, God, if Lesley's going to get out of bed before noon for this guy Biden, I better check him out. And we won by 3,163 votes, and I think it was those parents and those country club people, whose country club we couldn't get in because we were Catholic, but they all ended up saying it's better voting for this young Democrat than, you know, throwing rocks, which in the McGovern and the peace movement, you know, the riots on the campus. I'd rather our kids do that, and I'm talking too much.
No, we're here to
My
hear
son
you.
is back there. That's my son back there cuffing. I can get a look like, okay, Mom, that's enough. And I'm not going to talk about how handsome and brilliant and wonderful he is.
I thought he was over there in case he didn't like one of my questions.
No, I think he just plain likes you. So, yeah.
You mentioned young people voting for Joe. He has a problem with young people in this campaign, and I will ask you about that. But first, talking about young people, what do you make of this incredible campaign against Taylor Swift?
Oh.
I mean, I'm astonished.
I'm not. Unfortunately, I'm not astonished. I mean, at the baseness and it is just a sad commentary. And I was with Barbara Boxer last night, and she said these far right people. They don't know this campaign against Taylor Swift and because she likes Joe Biden and the Kansas City football team. Now, what they are supporting San Francisco, the 49ers, which is the most blue city in the entire country, and they don't know what they're doing. You know, they've switched the allegiance, so they're all for the 49ers, and yay, San Francisco.
This has nothing to do with anything, but my son-in-law is from Kansas City. We have been Chiefs fans forever. I have not just gone over like everybody else because of Taylor and Travis.
Yeah.
But is she going to endorse Joe Biden at the Super Bowl? Can I get a scoop?
I don't know, is she?
You don't know?
No. No.
No, you're not running this campaign this time.
If I knew, I wouldn't even tell you. So, as you know, so no, I got to as I did in the last presidential. My expression, as a sporting analogy, is I hung up my spikes and I laced on combat boots. And there are many young, old, middle-aged, many people who can manage, who have the skills now can manage a campaign. I mean, it's very, very difficult. And, but nobody knows Joe Biden and can, like I do. And so what I can do best is present and be a surrogate and represent my brother. And somebody else can worry about the social platforms or the polling numbers, and I can, in all humility, I can do Joe Biden, and nobody else can do him as well as I do. It is. I've always said it's not easy raising an older brother.
Now I wish I had a good question so we could see how she is, Joe. All right, Mr. President, why are you having trouble with young people?
Well, I think that, again, this is the difference, and it's hard, and I'm not being a pain in the neck. Well, I may be, but I'm not trying to be. I do not speak for the administration. I do not speak for President Biden. I know Joe Biden. So, and in campaigns, when I was managing them, I had liberty to talk about him. Once he moved over into governance, I never stepped over the line and interfere with the governance. So with young people, I think that we have to get the message out. First of all, I think people are just beginning to focus now. And things, I think in the last week, I've seen movement and things change.
In the polls?
Yeah. Huh. And I mean, you know, again, the polls are just a snapshot in time. And for the record, every Western leader, Macron, Schultz, the Prime Minister of the UK, all of Western leaders, their polling numbers are going down. I mean, it's a real tough to be a leader now. But Joe has always had his eye on the ball, and he's a public servant. Now, that doesn't make him noble or heroic, it makes him who he is. He just really is a public servant who believes that it should come from the bottom up, the middle class. We're the products of middle class. And he doesn't take victory laps. Like, I want him. I said, you know, get out there and, you know, say what we've done, which we will continue to do. But you know what is on the ballot more than accomplishments? It's character. And it's your character, just as much as it's my brother's character that's on the ballot. And what do you stand for? And every individual matters. And when the youth, and they go back, when they see the accomplishments, which we have to take more victory laps, this is what we've done. We have to inform people, but not, you know, we passed the Inflation Recovery Act. Like, what the hell is that, you know? Let's talk about what in real language, plain language, what we've done for energy, for infrastructure. Infrastructure, the bridges and the roads in the red states, the governors who voted against us. Say, look, you know, they're standing up and, you know, cutting the ribbon for the new bridge that Joe Biden and his team made happen with infrastructure.
But that red governor doesn't say that part of it.
No, and you know what? And Joe should say it, but he doesn't. His team should. I mean, he's never in the Senate. It's the same way. He didn't care who co-signed the bill. He gets the job done, and there's more to do, and we're going to finish the job. So there.
So I'm going to go back to the story in the book because it's such a good story. He was the youngest senator. As I said, he was so young, he couldn't be sworn in. When he was elected, he had to wait for his birthday, which came a couple of weeks later.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. And then really the heart of the book, which is the great tragedy. You know, Henry Kissinger once said, there should never be a president who doesn't face some kind of a horrible experience that they have to overcome and in order to be a full leader. Joe's wife and little baby was killed, we know, in a horrible car accident just a couple of days after he was sworn in.
6 weeks, December 18th. We won November 7th, which, by the way, we won the presidency 48 years later on November 7th. That's called persistence.
Well, this is a horrendous tragedy. And he thought he wouldn't become a senator after that because it was too difficult to raise his two little boys who survived the car accident. and be a senator in Washington. And how was he able to do this? Because he obviously became a senator and raised his 2 little boys. And how he was able to do that is thanks to you. So if you wouldn't mind, tell the story, because you don't really spell it out in the book, of how it came about that you helped him do that.
Well, he didn't become, thank you, but that's a lot more credit than I deserve.
I don't know. You tell the story and let everybody
Okay,
judge.
so we're elected on November 7th. December 18th, Joe and I are in Washington, and we're hiring staff because he was a rarity. He was 29 years old, and he's a great young hope at the Democratic Party. We have a stack of resumes. Senator Byrd gave us his office to use because the Senate was in recess for Christmas. So he and I are down there. We're ready to interview. Get a call from Jimmy Biden at home, and he said, "Val, come home." And Nelia, his wife, and Amy, her name was Naomi, and everybody called her Amy. The boys, who were 2 and 3, Bo and Hunter, and Aunt Val, and we called her Caspi because the boys, she was due at Halloween. And so they called, and she was born November 8th. Anyway, he said, "Come home." And Nelia was hit broadside with the tractor trailer. She and the baby, who was right behind her, were killed instantly. And Bo and Hunt flew in the station wagon with the Christmas tree on top forever. Hit trees, and it was really awful. So we came home, and what I say in the book, the thing that I remembered most of the day is clack, 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 our feet running in the Capitol because there was nobody there, and we were hitting the marble, running, and I would just remember to get on a plane to get home. Joe said that Jimmy Biden was there at the hospital.
Brother?
Yeah, taking care of everything, identifying the bodies. The boys are in intensive care, operating on. And my brother said that the boys, Delaware, could get another senator, but the boys could not get another father. And they had lost everything. He and Nelia had purchased a home in Chevy Chase. So they were going to move in. It was one last Christmas at home, and then they were going there. And it was just, in 1 minute you're on top of the world, and the next everything is wiped out. And the boys saved my brother's life because he had to get up, and he had a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. And it got time, he said, I don't know how I can do this, Val. I can't then leave Mama and Dada and Aunt Val and Uncle Jimmy and Frankie, and, I can't move. So I'm not going to do it. And he had my brother Jimmy ask him to call the governor to replace him. And I said to him, Joe, the same issues and the same needs that existed on November 7th when you were elected exist on December 19th. And Nelia worked too hard with you for this. And you, in my mind, the biggest thing was my brother needs purpose. And to get up, you got to get up. So my dad said, doesn't matter how many times or how often you get knocked down, it's how quickly you get up. So get up. Get up. And he said, well, I don't know how it will go. And I said, look, Joey, I'll move in until it's time, and I'll stay until it's time to go. There was no discussion. He just went, I said, okay. Nothing heroic, exactly what my brothers would have done for me.
You gave up your career. You actually gave up the path you were on, and you became these little boys' mother.
I tried very hard very consciously to be Aunt Val, as I said Aunt Val at the time. And it was magical. I mean, it was a terrible, terrible time, but it was such joy. My brother gave me a tremendous gift that I could help raise these two beautiful boys so that I could have a perfect child of my own, you know? I practiced on bow and hunt. So I have 3 children. So
You practiced.
And I mean, everything. I was the farthest thing from a mother. I didn't even like kids, you know? I mean, I didn't dislike them, but I didn't want to grow. I didn't want to grow up and get married and have kids. I figured kids would be a byproduct of getting married, and you know, there's a byproduct.
Well, you were married. You were married.
Yeah.
And he moved in too.
Yeah, and so it's the magic of family, and that's what the book is about. If I may.
It is about that. It's about family.
It is. People ask me, and perhaps I'm preempting you, of like, why did I write the book? Well, the stories in the book and the vignettes had already been written. When you have emotion, you experience emotions, whatever they are. Some people go out and run 10 miles, or they play the piano, or they create a work of art. I write. That's how I express. I don't sit down with an outline, or I just sit down, and what I'm feeling, I write. And my children said to me at some point, a couple of years ago, Mom, why don't you put these in a book? I said, why? I mean, who wants to read this? And they said, Mom, we want to read it. Our grandchildren want to read it. Write a damn book. Put it together. So the writing was easy, but it's picking, which child you like, which story that you want to put in.
Well, it turns out to be the story of you, but also of the President of the United States. It's a little more than a little memoir. It's history. I said that at the beginning.
But you know what? I think that's true. I mean, our story is specific and it's the president.
Right.
But every one of you has a story. It's about, I think, the fabric of family, the threads that weave families together, which are commitment and loyalty and love, and heartbreak and disappointment and grief. Every single one of you have it. So I think I didn't write it for a moral of the story. I wrote the book, and what do you want people to get out of it? What I would think is be really cool is when you read the book and you put it down, you say, God, that's me in there. That's my uncle. That's my brother. Well, he's mine. He's the president. But the others you can share. The other two. And so and I'm going to stop, but this is at the risk of sounding preachy. It's about empathy, which is what we are sorely lacking in our country right now. Atticus Finch said you could, to walk in another person's skin. There's nothing ordinary people do extraordinary things. Joe and I are ordinary kids, Irish Catholic middle-class family, mid-century, 20th century. And way back in mid-century. And he did extraordinary things, and I got to go along.
You called.
Did I answer your question, or did you ask me?
No, you did. You answered it beautifully. In fact, it's a very emotional story. There's another story that I love in this book, and it's a love story. So when they do the movie,
who do you think will play me? Will you?
Oh, anyway, the love story is a movie. It's Hepburn and Tracy movie kind of love story. You were married, you got divorced, and there was
Again, I married a very nice, good man, a banjo and a violin. And you could call either one of us. And he went to Vietnam, but we're different, and not a.
You
bad
say lovely
guy.
things about him in the
Not a bad guy.
But
just a mistake on my part.
But before you, at one point, your brother introduces you to his best friend, and you hate him. So much so you can't be in the same room with him. This is the love story.
It's his father we're talking about.
He must know this story cold. So I think it's a fabulous story. So tell the love story. It's too good. This is the movie. Forget Joe and the president. Forget it.
I'm at the University of Delaware. I'm a junior. Joe is in Syracuse Law School. He went to Syracuse because Nelia was in Syracuse and she was teaching. So that was in the days when law school started, September 25th instead of August 9th, and so it's the longest time that I had not been around Joe. I mean, we were best friends, really and truly. Every day we solved every world problem. Not so much by what we said, but by what we didn't say, the nuances and the understanding, that kind. So I'm going up. Joe said, come on up. It's homecoming at Syracuse. It was October 9th weekend, October 11th. And I said, okay. And he said, look, I've got this guy that I want you to go out with, which he had met at his first day at law school, and they were best friends. And I said, Joe, I'm coming up to see you and Nelia. I don't want to go out with anybody because I'm secretly in love, and I'm going to get pinned. Which was like going steady for anybody who didn't. So I'm not interested. And Joe said, no, he's really a good guy. And I'm thinking, oh, for Christ's sakes, Joe. Growing up, I couldn't go out with any son of a gun he knew because he knew them. And I couldn't go out with any son of a gun he didn't know because he didn't know him. So I thought, if Joe has this guy for me, I don't want any part of him. He's going to be a Jesuit or something, Nelia got on the phone, and she said, her expression was, I promise you. And she said, Valerie, I promise you, if I could pick any guy in the world for you, I would pick Jack Owens. And I thought, oh, because I love Nelia, and I knew she had good taste because she liked my brother. So I said, okay, one night. Now, Jack is he looked like he came off the cover of Gentleman's Quarterly. We're from Delaware, and I mean, we're not duds, but we're not Gentleman's Quarterly, I was in Vogue magazine, and he was. We meet him the next day for a football game, and he's from Garden City in the Hamptons, all right? He should be a tight-ass Republican, and he's not. He's a wonderful Democrat. And he has got a black watch plaid pants on, a camel hair cashmere blazer with the inside, the matching. Didn't come to Delaware till 5 years after, but he wore it well, and he comes around the corner, and Nelia's right next to me, and I grabbed her arm, and it was like I'd never seen anything like this, except on and he's very handsome, except on the magazine cover, and I went, and my mind was like, holy Christ, and he puts on his brakes, and he looks at me, and my brother, if he could have, he would have had trumpets and angels. Dun da da! Here's my sister. Isn't she wonderful? And Jack's looking at me like, oh, for God's sakes! And I was cute, and we just immediately we did not appreciate each other. He walks up the steps for the stadium. And he's always a gentleman. 5 law school couples. He stood back to let me in. And that son of a gun got in 10 people later. And I thought, who does he think he is? So, of course, I hit on the guy next to me to bring my pride back, who invited me up for the next weekend. So, Jack, I didn't care if it was at the end. Went on like that for the whole day. And we went back to Nelia's house, as all the couples did. And at 8 o'clock at night, Saturday night, somebody's looking for me, my brother. Your brother wants you, your brother wants you. And Jack is at the front door of Nelia's parents' home. And Joe said to me, Val, Jack's leaving. It's 10 of 8 on Saturday night. And he said, yeah, I had a study. Right. And he was very polite, and he said, well, it's very nice to have met you, Val. He said, I hope to see you again. And I thought it was so cool. I remember flipping my hair back and saying, well, not if I see you first. And he walked out, and Joe looked at me, and he said, what the hell is the matter with you? Why did you do that? He's my friend. He's a good guy. I said, he's an ass. And so it continued. We got married 10 years later to the weekend that we met, and we've been married for 48 years. But it was, he was very slow for this West Hampton. He came back into Manny to help us in the campaign in '72 because he was a big deal in Pennsylvania, and he had done Chapp's campaign and Mayor Flaherty's, and so he was the big gun who came in. I'm the campaign manager, and it was like it was 8 years. It was like we immediately met the first time. He walks in, hi, Jack, how are you? And I said, Jack, take a memo. That did not go over well. So he called my brother a couple months after that and said, look, Val, this is Joe, I will do anything for you. I want you to get elected, but we will talk together because I cannot deal with your sister. Blood is thicker than water, and if she says one more thing to me again, I feel like knocking her pearly whites right out. So I can't do anything, and I can't say anything bad about her. So I'm going to leave the campaign, and we'll just talk. And that's not bad about your father, was it? And yeah, so he just was, he wasted 10 years. He could have been with me.
I love it. I love it. He helped take care of the little boys.
Yes.
He stepped up. Every step of the way he stepped up.
Yes, he
What was wrong with you? I'm telling you, I read the book from your own pen, and I'm thinking, she's wrong.
Well,
That's how you wrote it.
Well, I was afraid. The biggest decision I had to make in my life was when I was 23 years old. Everybody had gotten married. All my friends had gotten married. And I believed my bad press, which was I had 3 brothers who adored me. I mean, they were wonderful, a wonderful father, a good home. And so it was like spoily girl. Like, you don't want to get married. You don't want to. And I didn't go to bars. I didn't sleep around. I didn't do drugs. I mean, I had a misspent youth. You know, I could have done so much.
But wait a minute, we're the same generation. We all got married young because we didn't live with the other person, if any of you are our age.
You want the exit ramp or the altered ramp, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we married young, and we didn't know each other. We did that.
Yeah.
And we didn't sleep around because we didn't have the pill yet.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that pill. Yeah, but I also had a big brother Hawkeye, and you know.
You know what? You said the book was about family, and it is. But one of the great unexplored relationships is the sibling one. They study mother-daughter, they study father-son, they study baby and mother, all of the relationships, except one of the most important, which is sister-sister, brother-sister. It's not looked upon for some reason as formative as it really, really is.
Mom told us that the strongest bond, there was nothing stronger and closer than a brother and sister.
If you're lucky.
Brother. Well, she didn't even say if you're lucky. But, I mean, she said there's nothing closer. And she told us that we were a gift to one another, and we believed it. I mean, my brothers are a gift. Jack I earned, but my brothers were a gift, and ours. I mean, again, we all have, you know, we argue, but we've never, I can say it absolutely, again, it sounds so pontificating or righteous. We never deliberately hurt each other. That doesn't mean we didn't hurt each other or we didn't make mistakes, but we never deliberately did that.
We're running out of time, and I do want to ask you one final question. You could have gone on to have a career as a political consultant, as a campaign manager for other people. and you always chose not to. Why didn't you want that career? It would have been a great one for you.
Well, I had the best of both worlds. I could be a campaign manager for what was 6 years Senate. So for 4.5 years, I could be normal, between every campaign, I had a baby. So you can guess what I did in those 4 years. I was home, could, Little League and raise my kids. And then I could represent Joe and do what I wanted when he couldn't come, and it was great. I thought I had the best of both worlds. One in the family's enough anyway, and I didn't want to be. And it's really hard because you got to give. When you get in a campaign, you sign adoption papers, not employment papers. You've got to you got to be there and do it. And the only one that I was big enough or grand enough to do that was with my brother. And so I didn't.
So he was your career, as you said.
Yeah, and I helped him, and
still do.
And I said it's not, and I like being first sister. I mean, it has a nice ring to it.